Ghostbusters Afterlife resurrected my spirit and rejuvenated my decayed, shriveled husk. That's a dramatic start. Let's back it up a bit. Everything sucks now. Seriously, we exist in a timeline where I just curl up in a corner and babble like the battered buffoon that I am, praying that one of the evil companies of the world don't grab another one of my favorite things, dangle it in my face, and tear it apart before my very eyes. Incidentally, Ghostbusters 2016, later rebranded Answer the Call, was part of the opening salvo for this tired woke age, and back then I thought it was the final nail in the coffin for this beloved series. Thankfully, Jason Reitman stepped up to the plate with all the swagger of a man whose father directed Junior, hiked up his pants, and swung for the fences. He didn't quite hit a home run, but hey, he rounded third handily. His dad also directed Ghostbusters, by the way. I mentioned Junior for comedic effect, but if I don't mention this, then someone in the comments will try to assert their dominance with common trivia. Ghostbusters Afterlife doesn't suck. Mostly. There's like partial suckage. Like when a cat toy clogs up your vacuum cleaner, but there's like still some suction happening. That's this movie. Let's start with my simplified spoiler-free impressions. It's a fun flick. Ghostbusters fans have no reason to avoid it. You'll like some things and maybe dislike others, but overall I think you'll find it an enjoyable return trip to the world you love. Non-Ghostbusters fans might actually have a better time. You won't understand the plethora of Easter eggs and references, but your experience will be unhindered by preconceived expectations. It's also not a woke joke, so there's that too. Spoilers. Massive, world-shaking spoilers. You have been warned. The movie begins with a certain bespectacled collector of fungus hauling ass out of an abandoned mine and speeding toward the most monstrous-looking house I've seen in a movie since... Monster House. We learn pretty quickly that he's on a mission, and sadly it goes unfinished as the movie whisks us away into the frankly depressing life of his estranged daughter and grandchildren. They're po AF, which we know since we get to witness them being evicted. Awkward. Sad. Moving on. The downtrodden Spangler clan then moves to Somerville, Oklahoma to reside in Egon's spooky old house. The mom, whose name I can't remember, just wants to loot the place for profit and move on with her life, but poor old Egon wasn't exactly swimming in gold coins. From here we follow Phoebe, Egon's granddaughter, as she discovers his complicated history and delves into the world of the paranormal. Oh, and her brother does stupid teen stuff sometimes. This is a mostly solid premise for a Ghostbusters sequel picking up so long after the original two. And honestly, the character of Phoebe made me smile ear to ear with her many socially awkward and scientifically minded Spenglerisms. Actress McKenna Grace does a great job mimicking some of Harold Ramis's subtle mannerisms from previous movies, but this character is also allowed to have a personality of her own, working hard to overcome her awkwardness in an admittedly short-lived search for friendship. Her mental catalog of horrible jokes, which she dispenses in various attempts to appear relatable to other characters, is tremendously endearing. I also love how seriously she takes certain revelations as they unfold in front of her. I especially liked a small moment where she solved a very Resident Evil-esque puzzle built into the floor of the house. Likewise, her new friend Podcast was perfectly likable and brought a nice, excitable energy to the movie throughout. Props to him for being flabbergasted that anyone could still disbelieve in the existence of ghosts, even though he apparently had never heard of the Ghostbusters. More on that later. Regardless, actor Logan Kim does a great job as the comedy relief here, especially considering he only has 2 credits on IMDb. Phoebe's teenage brother Trevor was, her brother? And a teenager, not sure if I mentioned that. He does teen things. Likes cars, I guess. And pretty girls. Lucky was a pretty girl, and she was present in this movie. And she's kinda unhappy about living in Somerville. Her dad is a cop. That's cool, I guess, even though it doesn't matter in the end. Are you seeing where I'm going here? There's a few problems. Most of the characters here are thin, flimsy. There's not an actor in the bunch who turns in a bad performance per se, but it's certainly difficult to elevate the kind of material they were given. Finn Wolfhard really isn't given much to do, which will be really disappointing to Stranger Things fans. He's there to be sarcastic, drive the car, and pine for Lucky. As Egon Spengler's grandson, you'd think he'd have a more notable story, but nah, that's pretty much it. Trevor does at least get to make one crucial play near the end of the movie, so he's not entirely useless here. It's a shame, though, that we don't see any real interactions between Phoebe and Trevor. They're brother and sister, and it's implied that he's the one who suggested she try to learn jokes in order to make a friend, but there's not much else there. You don't really get a sense of any real familial bond, and that's a shame. The idea that half of the next-gen Ghostbusters are siblings could have brought a new dynamic to the team. But instead, it's a wasted opportunity. I don't want to delve too deeply into the characters because, believe it or not, this isn't a deep dive. That's something I may do later once the home release is available, so I can rewatch Afterlife and really dissect the positives and negatives. So I'm going to talk a bit about the plot now, which, yeah, this is where most of my issues come from. First and foremost, I can't wrap my head around the fact that the existence of ghosts, demons, and gods is still considered a theory in the Ghostbusters universe. How Podcast, a kid obsessed with conspiracy theories and the paranormal, had never seen all of that readily available footage on YouTube is an absolute head-scratcher. I can't help but be reminded of the Star Wars sequels and how they expected us to believe Luke Skywalker was seen as a myth rather than a historical figure. This reeks of lazy writing. They want to have the new generation of characters have a sense of discovery as they step into the spotlight, whether or not it makes sense for them to be so clueless. It makes it feel as though these characters literally spawned into existence in their first scene, rather than existing in that world. There's also a notable amount of collateral damage caused by the new Ghostbusters, particularly as they sped through the middle of town and practically did a drive-by shooting down Main Street. The kids are taken into custody by local police, but they get out immediately and that conflict disappears from the movie entirely. If anything, the sheriff, Lucky's father, by the way, probably should have become the Walter Peck figure, being a massive thorn in the side of our characters. I also want to point out how supremely stupid it was that Paul Rudd's Mr. Gruberson knew what a ghost trap was, but still decided to force it open. If only Ghost Egon grabbed a pencil and wrote down some friendly advice, such as, "Dear Phoebe, don't let morons handle the equipment. With love, Ghost Grandpa." And now, let's go ahead and talk about the sad end of Egon Spengler. It's really tough to imagine how Egon ended up isolated on a farm at the end of his life. We're told that he uncovers the true history of the Gozerians in Somerville, but the other Ghostbusters, his friends and colleagues of many years who have faced not just spirits and gods before, but that specific entity, and they don't believe him. So he ransacks the firehouse, abandons his family, and begins the lone mission that eventually leads to his death. That's a tough pill to swallow. But I want to be clear here, I don't hate this, necessarily. Ghostbusters Afterlife is definitely not another The Last Jedi. From what we're told and what we see, Egon did the right thing. He stuck to his guns and rigged up a ton of traps and defenses to compensate for the fact that he was alone. He never wavered and instead sacrificed everything to try and save the world once and for all. He went out a hero, and that's not something that can be said about Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. So this, by comparison, is a breath of fresh air. However, in making Egon such a big damn hero, the other Ghostbusters end up looking like a bunch of bingers. They were already far from perfect, of course, and luck had a lot to do with their past victories. But it's sad to see Ray, Peter, and Winston fail Egon to such a degree. As for Egon's role in the movie, it's really nice that his presence was felt through the whole thing. Having him slowly introduce Phoebe to the paranormal through the chessboard was fun, as was his silent mentoring as she learned how to fix the proton pack. However, I can't help but feel as though they went a few steps too far. Leading up to the release, I told myself if there's a CGI Harold Ramis anywhere in this movie, then the whole thing will be irredeemable trash. In the end, that's not my feeling. Rather, Egon's initial ghostly appearance helping to lend Phoebe extra strength during the final battle, much like DBZ's Gohan Cell fight, weirdly enough, would have been the perfect use for the character and late actor. Instead, he proceeds to stand around awkwardly for what seems like an eternity as every other character addresses him one after another, remaining silent the entire time. It's not great, in my opinion, anyway. His appearance went from feeling bittersweet but impactful to uncomfortable and meandering. The fact that they're selling a dead Egon action figure and made it an overpriced store exclusive no less feels even more uncomfortable and cynical. However, for the characters in the story, I suppose it's nice that each of them got to have closure. And Egon seemingly moved on, perhaps because he no longer had any unfinished business. Look, at the end of the day, Harold Ramis' daughter not only gave her initial approval to the idea, but seems to love the end result. So whether or not I feel uncomfortable doesn't matter. I wouldn't be surprised if the scene grows on me in future viewings. After all, Egon was basically a more helpful Force Ghost than actual Star Wars Force Ghosts have been. And by the way, I don't mean to sound so negative about Afterlife. These are just my honest thoughts. For the most part, I was actually loving the first half of the movie. It was fun, and I was intrigued to see where it was going, and then it went to Walmart and completely shit the bed. That whole scene is just the epitome of cringe-inducing, and I feel like even Paul Rudd knew how it was going to play to audiences, because he was extra hammy in that scene. It almost feels like a late addition, something wedged into the movie after the fact simply to inject cutesy characters and slapstick humor. Let's be real, the Mini-Puffs are a desperate attempt at giving the Ghostbusters franchise its own Porgs or Baby Yoda, designed solely to sell toys and plushies. Logic be damned. Because they don't make any actual sense here. The original Stay Puft was the physical manifestation of a destructive god whose form was chosen by a pinhead. It wasn't Voltroned together from millions of marshmallows. What exactly brought these mini marshmallows to life? Why did they immediately morph into the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man instead of white blobs? Looking only at the surface level humor of it, I can appreciate the Gremlins-like humor of the scene. One of the mini puffs even gets put into a blender, so I think that was an intentional homage. But if this scene had to exist, it should have just been a group of chaotic ghosts, maybe emboldened by an apocalyptic surge of PK energy. Actually, this is part of a larger problem prevalent throughout the film's runtime: key jangling. There's way too many moments where the movie stops for a second just to wave something in your face and say, "Remember this? Remember it?" The Crunch Bar in Egon's jumpsuit, the Twinkie in the glove box, the firehouse pole, that thing Canadian treasure Rick Moranis wore on his head one time, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, Venkman's psychic test, and hell, even Gozer and the Terror Dogs can fall into this category. One or two of these things would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with fan service. It can be fun depending on the execution. But the sheer volume of it is kinda insulting. Like they expect us to swoon over the presence of a Twinkie. But your mileage may vary on this. It just personally rubs me the wrong way. I'll also readily admit to being bitter toward Hollywood, so maybe my viewpoint is clouded. I can't help but think the Walmart scene should have been thrown out and replaced by a montage of our main characters honing their skills and busting ghosts, establishing teamwork along the way. Side note, I was excited to learn more about Ivo Shandor, but they really deflated my blimp on that one. Final verdict. All in all, this is not a bad movie by any means. A lot of it is genuinely a lot of fun to watch, especially when the Ecto-1 is getting its time to shine. The plot has some serious problems, and many of the characters could have been replaced by planks of wood. But the main character is surprisingly likable and carries Afterlife on her back. Even with its problems, this is by far one of the best franchise revivals in recent years, to the point that I don't want there to be a sequel, cause the all-consuming evil entity known as Hollywood will surely drive it right back into the ground. So, in closing, go see it. Or don't. I ain't your dad. Hey everybody, and thanks for watching. This is officially my first written review for the channel. I hope you all enjoyed it to some extent. I typically try to ad-lib everything, because when I read from a script like this, I feel like I sound way more robotic, but unfortunately that was unavoidable this time. I just can't do a review off the cuff. Trying to just review everything in one go, without a script, was an absolute nightmare, and listening back to the audio, it sounded like I was having a stroke. Hell, while I was listening to it, I started smelling toast and tasting copper, so yeah, that got scrapped. Hopefully this is better. But anyway, before I let you guys go, I have to thank my subscribers. There's like 520 of you guys as of the time of this recording. Just, you know, thank you. Like, I keep saying I'm blown away by it, and that's because that's the only way I can really express how I feel about this. I'm not even 3 months into the YouTube thing, and I don't know, just this many subscribers was nowhere in my expectations. I thought for sure by this point I would have maybe 2 subscribers, one of which would be me. Honestly, the other one would probably be my brother. And I'd have like 3 videos out there with like 4 or 5 views each. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, you guys continue to motivate me and just make this whole experience fun. So I want to thank you guys for that too. Real quick, I also want to make sure to give a special shout out to Adam Vraden, because hearing his impressions of the movie is what finally gave me the last push I needed to decide to go out and see it for myself. I was totally assuming that it was another franchise revival that was botched, but he had some good things to say about this, and I did enjoy my time in the theater, so yeah, thanks again, Adam. There's a lot of different ways to find me now. I'm gonna have a bunch of links in the description below and probably in a comment. I now have a channel on Odysee. I now have a Rumble channel. I'm gonna work on a BitChute channel when I quit being lazy. If you feel like tossing me a few bucks, you can go to ko-fi.com/baffledbuffoon. I have several membership tiers set up even. It's in a similar fashion to Patreon, but it's not Patreon. I don't know, I considered Patreon, but then I heard a lot of people don't like them anymore. I don't really know what's behind the drama there. But yeah, I also stream twice a week, typically on Fridays and Sundays. On my second channel, I'm considering streaming more often. The second channel was originally meant to be a stream archive, but that wasn't working out the way I thought it would. So now I have to find something to do with it, and yeah, I might just end up streaming more regularly on that channel, so all you guys on my main channel don't get bombarded with notifications. I don't want to be a pest. But yeah, other than that, thanks for watching. I'm Baffled, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye! I also want to give a special thanks to the one employee who was working that day at my nearest theater. There was a catastrophic series of technical difficulties, and this poor guy was, like I said, working all alone. He said his manager completely disappeared on him. All the digital signs were down. The lights in all the various theaters weren't on or off when they were supposed to be. The stairs weren't lit up. The movies weren't playing, and this is a movie theater. Movies should probably be playing. And this poor guy was just running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to get everything fixed, trying to ring people up for their tickets, trying to contact his manager, just pouring sweat, shaking from nerves. I felt so bad for the guy. But he pulled through and he got everything up and running again. But I noticed his name was under his seat, so yeah. Just special thanks to Joseph. You know who you are if you happen to be listening to this.